Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and today I'm going to go over my recommended changes for the Blood Angels here. I have voiced some of these thoughts before on other videos, so those of you that have been watching my channel for quite some time probably know most of the changes that I'm going to recommend with this faction here. But as I've been going through my unit review videos, adding some time codes per your guys' request, it kind of jogged my memory on all these units when I was watching those matches go through against the AI. And after getting more experience since originally uploading those videos, figured I would go back and make a video for each faction specifically, as many people have been asking me my thoughts on certain factions and what I'd like to see changed for the factions. And because my original videos had those multiple factions all grouped together, they didn't like that, so they requested that I go back and kind of give my updated thoughts on all the units here that I would recommend for changes and then make it faction specific. And the most solid argument I heard to do that was, well, maybe someday somebody like from Slytherin will watch one of these videos and then they can just, if they're thinking about making some tweaks to a faction, then you'll have everything in one spot. I said, okay, that's probably a pretty solid argument. I doubt that's going to happen, but in the off chance that it does, I figure I can end up doing that, and it shouldn't be too much effort, and who knows, maybe this will help for the future. Now, I will, in full disclosure, note that Slytherin does have a Discord channel, and if you have bugs to report or recommendations for changes, they do state to post it on that channel. But I've seen lots of changes being requested and other kind of bug reports, and I have yet to see most of them being fixed, so I've become somewhat disillusioned. So I figure I'd just put together my own little video series here with my 2 cents. Now, if you disagree with some of these recommendations, please let me know. Comment below on the video. I'm always curious to know what other players' thoughts are. I certainly don't think that my voice is necessarily omnificent with these changes, and I also want to throw the disclosure out that I don't recommend that Slytherin make every one of these changes that I have for the factions, because if they do, it would probably make them a little bit too overpowered. But I do think that making some of these changes may make all these units become more viable, because what I really want is to have every unit have a solid foundation, and that way every unit in a roster should be viable for certain matchups, because that is certainly not the way it feels. And then this game has had some slow power creep over several patches, and so some units that have been abandoned really have not made the cut, and so they have definitely significantly fallen behind, and I would just like to get them brought up to speed here to be a better option. So with that, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you, and I will go through my recommended changes. So the first unit I would like to see have some minor changes is the Lieutenant, and I pretty much like everything they've done here, except I think he needs to have the Sword of Sanguinius changed a little bit. I never see anybody use this ability. Where it could be very nice is on a really big map where you can't quite reach a capture point, the very first one. You know, you pop your jump pack and you do this. Now all of a sudden you have, you know, +4 movement, so you're up to +8 in addition to a 9 if you want to use up your last remaining action point. And then with 9 movement, that should allow you to capture any strategic point that's in your vicinity on that first turn. So that's where this really shines. But what I would like to see is actually, instead of it having an evasion penalty, I'd actually like to see it have an evasion buff. So and with that, I think you could potentially see players actually use this ability more, because then you would really increase the Lieutenant's evasion. I don't know if it necessarily has to be +15, you know, maybe +10, bringing them up to 35, because that's where the Librarian gets, and he can actually be pretty hard to take down with 35, so I don't think you necessarily want to go more than that. But I think that would be a pretty nice ability, and you may actually find that players use this more frequently because of that increased evasion. So I would like to see that ability reworked. I think you can make some arguments that maybe the side weapons are a little bit too overpriced, maybe mildly reducing the cost of the other loadouts would be something as well that might be tweaked. But overall, the Blood Angel's other weapons are incredibly powerful, so you certainly don't want to make the Thunderhammer too cheap, because the thing is just ludicrously strong and allows him to squad wipe most medium tier infantry all by himself. But overall, that was my 2 cents for changes to the lieutenant. The other thing I would like to see changed is I would like to see every Blood Angel bolter weapon get at least 2 armor piercing. I mean, they're shooting explosive grenades, for God's sake. So giving them the same armor piercing as a lasgun of a Cadian shock trooper just feels ludicrous. So at least give every bolter here 2 armor piercing. So, you know, that would be your Librarian Dreadnoughts here. That would be, what else has it? The Furioso Dreadnought, your Bolt Storm Gauntlets with your Aggressors, your Storm Bolter here, you know, all those things I think should have at least 2 armor piercing. That way it feels more like a bolt gun. Going back to the Invictor Warsuit here, and then this will also be doubly true for the Aggressor here with the standard loadout. What I would like to see is the Fragstorm grenade launcher have increased damage and also increased armor piercing, so it becomes a more versatile attack, because effectively doing 7 to 10 damage on the unit you're hitting and then doing splash damage that can't even squad wipe the lowest tier units, it even struggles against taking out some Scarab Swarms, just doesn't feel good. So slightly tweaking the amount of damage that you're getting here, and then with the Aggressor with your standard loadout here would make this feel much more powerful, make them become a much more viable option. The Flamestorm Gauntlets are just way better, and then by giving the Boltstorm Gauntlets a little more armor piercing, I think that'll increase the amount of damage they're doing, and I think that would make these guys become a much more viable option. But compared to every other, I mean, even compared to a frag grenade, this isn't even the equivalent. So it's just vastly inferior option. It has the same amount of cooldown as the Paragon Warsuits, and the Paragon Warsuits even have the ability not only to do more damage, but they also get 100% accuracy, where you have to worry about accuracy with the Fragstorm grenade launchers here. So that's why I think they should be buffed a little bit, and that should dramatically increase their viability for the play options. Another unit I'd like to see some minor tweaks happen to are the Assault Marines here. Now, the Thunderhammer Storm Shield, this is an amazing combo. Everybody loves this. If they're going to bring Terminators, they're going to bring this loadout. But what I'd like to see is the Lightning Claws become a viable option. So obviously the Thunderhammer and Storm Shield's meant to be a tank, anti-vehicle, anti-hero killer, because, you know, they have armor piercing of 8. What I'd like to see with the Lightning Claws is that these become like the ultimate anti-low tier to medium tier infantry killers. So I would like to see them have more splash damage. So you can keep it to be 6 to 8 splash damage, ideally be a little bit more, but I think you need to make it like ×3 splash damage, so then it hits lots of different models in the squad, and then these guys could absolutely tear apart, you know, Gretchen, Cadian shock troops, Kasserkin, you know, unarmored units. They should have the fear of God, or the Emperor in this case, be in them when they're seeing these lightning claws coming at them. But where they are now, they just feel like they're just limp, and nobody uses these lightning claws with where they're at. So please add some more splash damage to these to really make them become a viable option in the game. Now, this I'm not quite sure, but just with my experience, it seems like the Black Rage is being triggered way more than what you would expect, because technically they only have a 35% chance to being triggered. But I'm finding that if I'm squad wiping, you know, 10 units, statistically I should maybe get 4 charges of Black Rage, and I'm almost always getting up to 5 stacks. And so if there's a bug where this is getting activated at a higher rate than it's supposed to, I would actually keep that the way it is, because I really like the mechanics here where you're bringing in the Death Company, you give them a hand flamer, so now they're 110 points, you jump over, there's a low tier infantry in your way, you hand flame them down with their basic fearless ability where they start with 45 or 65 momentum. They then kill the squad wipe somebody with the hand flamers, they then have enough momentum to surge. You now have 5 stacks of your black rage, and then you do a melee attack with your chainsaws doing shit tons of damage. It actually feels really good. And then as your opponent, you're like, holy shit, these guys are doing all this damage. You have to focus fire these guys down, and they really make you have the fear of the Emperor when you're fighting these guys and they're fully stacked up. So I just wanted to say, if this is bugging out and the black rage is getting triggered more than it's supposed to, please don't change it, because it actually makes the Death Company finally a viable option. Because prior to this, everybody would just go with the Assault Marines instead, because it would be a cheaper option, and with their selected buffs it would be much more likely to pay off for you. But the Death Company finally feels like it's in a spot where people actually want to be using them. So if that is a bug where it's activating more than it's supposed to, please keep it the way it is. And likewise, make it so the hunger ability for the flayed ones also gets activated a little bit more, so they have an increased chance of getting stacks as well. Now, the other unit that I would like to see changed is the Intercessors here. I just feel that they're not in a good spot currently. These are supposed to be your general well-rounded ranged units. Now, I get that the bolt rifle, the auto bolt gun, these were balanced around the campaign, but most people aren't sitting here playing the campaign multiple times. They do the campaign and then they jump to multiplayer, and so they think these guys are really going to pay off, but they don't. So what I'd recommend is increasing the bolt rifle to 3 armor piercing. Maybe you need to slightly increase their cost if you're going to buff up their ranged weapon, but I think that would be highly recommended. And maybe you reduce the penalty from 75% down to 50% or something like that, so they're not taking all that melee damage in exchange for using this, because this is really the only way they can do viable damage. Unless you're attacking the most weakened forces, but even then you'll struggle squad wiping them, and sometimes it makes sense just to throw a frag grenade to guarantee a kill, unless you're going to spend 10 additional points to give them the auto bolt rifle here. But then again, for 80 points, there's just much better units on your roster to select here. And then if I have to choose between 70 points for an Intercessor and 70 points for an Assault Squad, which has a jump pack, crack grenades, additional melee accuracy, 50% melee damage, you know, a chainsword that does 5 armor piercing with pretty decent base damage, and then having the option to, you know, increasing their melee damage by an additional 25%. It's just, these are not equivalent units here. So something needs to change with these Intercessors to make them more viable. So either increase their damage a little bit, or what I'd like to see is just increase their armor piercing a little bit. That way these guys actually can do damage to more unit types, and therefore if they're using the battle line doctrine, it would actually make them become viable, because now they'll actually start to do damage against medium tier units and even do some light damage to vehicles as well. And I think that would be an easy fix for these guys. But right now these are not equivalent units at 70 points, and so the only people I really see use these, other than very specific matchups, are newer players, and then they're just immediately regretting their life decisions because these guys never pay for themselves. So please make some minor changes there with these units here. And then the only other thing I would say is, if any ability has splash damage, I think you need to tell them how much it splashes to. That way everybody is on the same page, so people are not having to guess. Because here, you know, you talk about the 9 splash damage, which is great. You talk about the 1 splash damage, but please, with your abilities, say how many units are going to be affected, because not everybody is affected with the, you know, Vision of Angelic Fury or the Blood Lance. So please specify. So here it actually does say 6 targets per tile, so that's good, but please specify here. And then if you want to keep the armor, what I think is happening is they're saying, well, the mastercrafted things are the ones that are going to have 3 armor piercing, which is why, you know, the bolt pistols here for your commanders are so much better than the bolt pistols for the bolt pistols for the other factions, which I get. but it also significantly decreases their efficiency. So by only having 1 armor piercing, it just makes us abysmal. So bolt weapons shooting rocket propelled grenades should have at least 2 armor piercing is my thought process here. Otherwise, I think the Blood Angels actually play pretty well and are overall a pretty well balanced faction. Pretty much all their units have some versatility, so again, this is a faction that I think they actually did pretty well on, and of course you would expect that to be the case since they built the whole base game around this faction. But I think if you made a few of those tweaks here, realizing that it's not being balanced around the single player campaign but the multiplayer, I think this would really help the core mechanics here and make them be even more viable. So a bit of a shorter video here, but I don't have a whole lot to say. You know, I have mixed feelings on the assault cannon. I feel like that typically hits below what you would expect, but again, you don't want to make it so overpowered because you want to have the heavy flamer be outperforming it. So those are my 2 cents here on recommended changes for the Blood Angels. Otherwise, overall, I feel like I like most of the other units. I think they all have their own unique play styles, and I find that players will bring almost any of these units other than the ones that I talked about for some recommended changes, because again, I never see the aggressors, I never see the intercessors, I occasionally see inceptors. I don't see furiosos used anymore because you have better options, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily bad. It just means that there's lots of really good units on the roster here. So I think with these minor tweaks, that should be even better. So if you have other thoughts, you think I'm full of shit, comment below. Let me know your reasoning. If there's changes that you'd like to see happening with this faction, please state below of this video as well, because I'm always curious to know what you guys have to say about this, because a lot of you guys have been spending a lot of time with this game as well, and I'm always curious to know what your guys' thoughts are with these changes in your experience, because obviously I can only speak from the online matches that I've been participating in. So some of you may have been fighting opponents that play much differently than the ones I've played, but that's kind of been my 2 cents on what I've seen from my matches and experience when I bring the Blood Angels out on certain matchups. So with that, I'm going to sign off for the day. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.